All right, hello everybody. Good morning. Sorry for the late start. I got through the technical issues. Julie Burden. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors. We're going to have a huge mahalo to the Hawaii Department of Agriculture as our co-sponsor. Also, our platinum sponsors, Monarch Coffee, Savor Brands, Greenwell Farms, as well as Tricor Braun. Our gold sponsors, Satake, Kona Hills, Rural Crop Insurance Services, and then, of course, our silver sponsors as well, Green Flash Coffee, Maui Grown Coffee Distributors. And then I'd also like to take a quick second to remind everyone to vote online. If you're a member, you should have had your ballots delivered to you via email. If you have any questions, please ask Ala. And then to introduce our speaker today, Emilio Lopez. He is the Managing Director of Odyssey Coffees, an agro-industrial organization based out of El Salvador, which together with the sister companies in the United States and Brazil, runs a vertically integrated coffee business. From 2017 to 2019, he was a Roaster Guild's chairman. In 2019, he held a seat on the HCA board. He is the founder of Cuatro M Cafe, Topeka Coffee, and Odyssey Coffees, the most innovative, efficient, and modern coffee operation in the country. And the talk today will be Living with Coffee Leaf Rust. Emilio, take it away.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Ala. And thank you to the Hawaii Coffee Association. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to start by sharing my screen here real quick. Let me share this screen, and I hope I can still see you all. Oh, all right. I think, can everyone can see my screen? I'm not able to see chats or other windows. I can only see my screen, so I hope you all do.
I can see it, Emilio. It looks good.
Okay,
and I'll be moderating the chat.
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
All righty. So let's start right here. So thank you again for having me. My name is Emilio Lopez Diaz, and I am very happy to be here and proud. And I really thank you, Julie, for inviting me, and Ala and everyone in the team. Thank you. So again, a big thanks to the Hawaii Coffee Association. I'm very fortunate, and I can say that I have been to Hawaii to see coffee growth or coffee growing, and it's admirable what you all have over there. And I'm, makes me happy to be able to, probably 10 years after I visited, be able to talk to you all. So first of all, today I will take the time a little bit to talk about, the history and facts about coffee leaf rust. I'm actually not an engineer. I didn't study necessarily in school any biological or any chemistry or biology, chemistry, but I got immersed in coffee when I was 22 years old. So I am not going to go into detail necessarily about, technical data and the specifics of the chemical composition of the products that you are able to use. But I will give you an overview of what I have seen around the world, the places that I have traveled, and what we have been able to do at our farms, and what has worked in our case and what has not helped. So, the historical and facts about coffee leaf rust are going to be based out of, a little bit of research that I have done, and just like a general idea of where did it come from and how did it spread all over. And I want to make this presentation more like a discussion, and again, sharing a little bit of what I have lived in coffee and my realities down here in El Salvador, and again, what I have seen in other places. So besides talking a little bit about the history and just facts about leaf rust, I'm going to also try and share with you all what I have seen in other countries and what different places or big producing countries have done to react to the leaf rust. And as we will see, different countries have tried different things. And for some have worked out well, and for the others, didn't go that well. So we're gonna kind of chat and to see what are the comparisons and what can we take away from that. Another thing that I would like to touch base on is just trying to identify what are the key factors to prevent rust and then to control it if it has taken over. Because the first thing that we want to do while managing our farm or managing the problem of a country is trying to prevent it. Because once it is in our fields and once that it has taken over, it's pretty hard and pretty expensive and pretty exhausting to take control over the infestation. And then also, as I was saying, we're going to explore what do I mean about prevention, and that it should always be our first option. You know, controlling and spraying and doing everything else, it's the last resource. It's the last thing we want to be facing if we can prevent this from happening. And for sure, there are ways to prevent this and to live with this, as you know, the title of the presentation says. We need to learn how to live with rust. And I come from a country where 30 years ago we were the 4th largest producer of coffee in the world, and now we don't even appear in charts because our country, unfortunately, didn't make the right decisions at the time when this hit us. So, you know, again, I can share with you all what we have done and what has not worked, and what I have done specifically in our fields. And then again, once the prevention or once the infestation took over, what are the ways to control it and how to come out of that, you know, infestation or, you know, problem at your own business. And then I am not an expert on the situation, how it is right now in Hawaii. I have talked to a few people over there, and I have a good idea of what you all are going through. I think you all had a similar situation. I think it was like 8 years ago or 9 that the berry borer Broca first came into Hawaii, and that has impacted very negatively in the coffee industry in Hawaii. But at the same time, you know, you have been able to work around it and live with it and control it. And I'm pretty sure, you know, it's going to happen again, you know, with a different problem. And that's kind of like the takeaway from this presentation, as you will see. The takeaway pretty much is, hey, these things are here to stay, and they're not going to be the only ones, and they're going to keep coming. So we got to be very clear about that. If we're in the coffee industry, you know, everything is against us, and they're just going to keep coming. But as good farmers, we have to overcome, adapt, and keep going, because coffee will always, you know, be consumed, and we need to provide that for the consumer. So with that said, I don't typically start presentations talking about myself, but I will, you know, have to start here because some of you might not know me, and you know, sometimes I might, you know, believe that, okay, what does this guy really have to talk us about, or how, you know, what experience does he have? If he's not an engineer, or if he's didn't study biology, you know, what does he have to say about rust and how to live with it? Well, so I am from El Salvador. My name is Emilio Lopez Diaz. I I have been in the coffee industry since 2000, pretty much, and I have been a little bit, throughout the whole industry, acting in different roles. But my first role pretty much was to manage my family's farm back in El Salvador, or here in El Salvador. As you see in that picture, that is one of the farms that I started managing. And if you see, and if you can't see by chance my cursor, right there in that little middle right there, that's where the farmhouse used to be. And when I first got there, there was just the house. And if you see around that house, everything around the area is coffee, first of all. Everything in the picture is coffee growing in those hills. Besides just being coffee, every single corner of those farms that are seen in the picture, or that farm, is managed exactly the same. So this picture was taken in 2001. I took it. So that picture is 20 years old. So when I first got into coffee in El Salvador, coffee was managed, again, only by one method. 100% of the farms were Bourbon or bourbon. Everything was shade grown. Everything was just stumped, nothing else. There was not another pruning method. There were the same exact products to combat any diseases, and just the status quo seemed to work always, right? So that's what I got exposed when I first got into coffee. Okay, coffee is something that you just manage the same way that it's been managed for the last 200 years in my family, and that's about it. So it was not until 2006 that I was able to visit other countries to see what coffee looked like. The first country that I went to was Honduras. A little bit similar, but smaller farmers, not big farms, but similar in a way. But that same year, I went to Brazil. And in Brazil, I found something completely different. And as I will continue talking in the presentation, I'm going to go specifically to the details of what is that I saw different over there, because that is what opened my mind and got me to start changing the way that we had been growing coffee at our farms specifically. So again, I did not only stop in visiting Brazil, but I have visited pretty much every single country in Latin America that produces coffee. I have also been to Hawaii. I've been there twice to see coffee. I have been to also Africa. I've been to Ethiopia to see the origin of this product. And not only have I visited, but I've also done a little bit of work in those countries, whether that was a little bit of a consultancy, or in the case of Brazil, I went and fell in love and with the country, and I decided I wanted to become a farmer there. So I also have that a little bit of experience on what is that works there and how could I come apply it in El Salvador. What started in El Salvador with about 50 acres of land, I slowly started growing to what we have now out of El Salvador, which is a little bit about 600 acres. In Brazil, our farm, together with my Brazilian partners, is comprised of about 200 to 255 acres as well. So I'm a little bit invested in the business. I'm a sixth generation coffee farmer. When I began in the industry, my mother, which was one of 11, and her mom was one of 12, I started only with her portion, which was, again, the 50 acres. No mill, no farm, no roastery, no exporting, nothing of what I have now, which is, a growth of 20 years being in the industry. So I got immersed in El Salvador again back in 2000 after I finished my school or my college in the US. And I have actually done it, myself with my team. I'm someone that really takes the time to get his hands dirty, and I want to try things that I have seen elsewhere, and I want to implement those things and create change at my own farm. So again, take a look at that photo right there, because I'm going to show a couple of pictures that show what that has turned into in the present. And mainly because, again, I saw things done differently elsewhere, but I was hit pretty hard by the topic that we're talking about this morning. So that's a little bit of who I am as a farmer and as a member of this coffee industry. So let's start by talking a little bit of the basics of what is coffee leaf rust. Coffee leaf rust is its Latin term or name is Emilia Lopez, and it is a spore, and it is a spore that mainly is dispersed by wind or rain. We can also transport it, or it travels through us, because we work at the fields, and the leaf rust or the spores get in our hands, get in our clothes, and get in everything that we move around the trees. So that's the way that it spreads naturally, again, by wind and by rain. It's important to say that this spore specifically germinates or recreates or procreates itself only in the presence of free water. What is free water? Well, it is rainwater or the dew. So if we were at a place where, obviously there's no place where we can grow coffee that's little rain involved, but, rain or the humidity of being wet, it's what it helps germinate the spore. That's why it's mainly concentrated through the rainy season. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't live in the farm in the dry season, because wherever there's humidity or wherever there's shade or wherever there's, not specifically a very dry area, that little spore will survive as well throughout the dry season. So again, when the rains come or when the dew is very strong, that's when the spore starts again to recreate or procreate or germinate. So that's a little bit of what do we have in our hands when we're talking about rust. And then another interesting thing is that we didn't really know about it until 1861. As a biological thing, this has been growing or existing for probably as long as coffee has existed, but we hadn't really seen it or understand it until it was discovered in 1861 in East Africa in Lake Victoria. Most likely was because we started doing mono cultivation, or we commercially were growing coffee, and then we started noticing how it would spread. Because again, in a forest or in its native landscape or territory, leaf rust probably you would go out without even noticing, because it kind of balances out Whereas if you have a mono cultivation or a farm only dedicated to coffee, that's when you start noticing that it's, how devastating the results can be. So again, it was discovered or first spotted in 1861, but that was very near the origins of coffee. It was very, understandable that that's where it would, get spotted. But it wasn't until only 8 years later that, it was spotted as well in Sri Lanka, or in what it used to be Ceylon. And that then it was spotted, and it was pretty much attacking big fields of coffee. And the curious thing is that it wasn't an island. As we know, Sri Lanka is off the coast. So that's when we started, or the industry started understanding that that this spore was able to travel not necessarily only by wind and rain, but also probably by us, that we're taking trees to be planted in other places, or even us again in our clothes, or wherever it was able to travel on. So obviously the result of an attack of rust, especially without even understanding what this meant, it just devastates. And that's where the name comes. It's a total devastation. And the curious thing about rust is that one day you're seeing a beautiful field, lush green, and then next day you go again to the same field, and well, literally almost the day after, or a couple of weeks later, and it's just completely infested. That's how quick this thing travels, and that's how quick it germinates and spreads. One curious thing while I was doing the research, it took pretty much a century to go from Africa to the rest of the world. So what happened was that we had a very strict, apparently, a very strict quarantine system or measures throughout a century that wouldn't allow these spores to travel to the other countries where we were colonies, pretty much, and where coffee was being transported or being spread. So it took, again, almost a century to be spotted and to be a big, huge problem for Latin America. And the first time it was spotted outside of Africa was in Brazil in 1970. And that, pretty much created devastation for Brazil. Soon after, it traveled to Colombia, and then it soon traveled to Central America, and well, it got out of control in the 70s. So again, this is how it began. That's how it traveled, and let's go, and that's how, again, that's what we know so far. By visiting some countries and by doing a little bit of research, I would like to show you what my understanding is of what each of these 3 countries or regions in the world did to either combat or control leaf rust. So pretty much, I'm going to talk about 3 countries where I have, or 3 regions where I have spent a lot of time, and what I have seen, the results, and where I have seen what has happened. So the first country that I would like to talk about is Brazil. That was the first country where it was spotted, or where its first attack was in Latin America. And again, this was in 1970. So Brazil, being the biggest country, a producing country in the world, and with the biggest resources, they and being a very, pretty much first world country, it dedicated a lot of research and development to understanding, first of all, what this was. So as soon as they got hit, they started, monitoring this in their labs, and they had a big research program already. Back then, the government most likely was in control of the research, because now there's a lot of private companies and institutions and schools and the government, there's different entities doing research, but back then probably it was mainly the government. So, again, a lot of research and development, or a lot of ways to understand how did it spread, what it was, how did it spread, how to control it, what killed it. So a lot of that happened back then, and it's happening in Brazil. Research and understanding how to control this. Also, very quick, they understood that you can control it biologically or chemically. Chemically, we will talk a little bit about what sprays are there and what products. And then biologically, we know that it's a fungus, and funguses also get controlled by other funguses that take over, or naturally, we could burn as they did back then, which, they didn't know what to do, how to stop it. So you would prune or stump the whole farm and then burn the leaves that were infested or infected. So either biologically or chemically or just naturally. And then they also started, a lot of their coffee was sun-grown by then, but they started noticing that, by having their fields being sun-grown, a very separated or plant distance structure, very well organized, and then by innovating in their agricultural practices, by doing everything on time and pruning, and again doing these controls on time, and also monitoring when there was an infestation. So they took the time and the resources and planned everything to understand how to prevent this thing from spreading even more. The other thing that they did with their research, and you can see it over there, is that they went to a multi-varietal approach in the Arabicas, but also they decided, okay, if Robusta doesn't get affected by rust, let's not depend solely on Arabica. So they went as well and diversify a little bit, and not only in the Arabicas, but also the Robusta. So that was a little bit of the approach that Brazil took, and you see it still today. That, and if you ask me why Brazil doesn't have that much of a problem with rust, there is the answer right there. They did their homework and they had a strategy, and it has worked for them. And if you ask me, and I have that little graph over there, what about the output and the quality? Well, I think Brazil, out of those three regions, is the only one that follows that graph when it comes to output. And I would say as well in quality, because, we'll talk about it later, but yes, they planted more Robusta, but they also specialized and innovated in processing, not only in farming. The approach that Colombia took was a little bit different, similar, but different. They went as well for the research and development. They created their own institute. They had it already, but they started to focus on this. And then besides understanding that, you could do this and you can control the rust by biologically and chemically controlling it, you could also create new resistant varieties. One thing different than Brazil was that, first of all, they kept the traditional agricultural practices, and they focused only on one resistant variety, which back then was Colombia. So yes, Colombia still produces Típica and Bourbon and Caturra, But in the late 70s and 80s, they decided that their flagship varietal will be one created by them. So they focus only on one variety. This was the super varietal of Colombia, as it was called. And again, they kept their traditional agricultural practices. That means, again, the same structure in the fields, almost everything shade grown, fields or hills, very labor intense. That's what they did. Their graph, if I were to compare it to Brazil, their graph has been a little more flat. You know, Colombia went from producing 14 million bags almost all the way down to 7, almost like 10 years ago. Why? Because Colombia, the varietal that they had created, unfortunately also got hit with rust. So they had to also come up with a new variety later, which was Castillo. And Castillo now also has problems with rust. So again, if you were to draw the Colombia line, it would be a little flatter, obviously, than Brazil. Brazil is completely the opposite. They just keep going up. And yes, the other example is Central America. And that's where probably the biggest devastation and the biggest problem has been. And it seems that there's only one country that has done things, does have done things well with regards to the output. So in the case of Central America, there has been little research, with the exception probably of Costa Rica and nowadays Honduras. But for the rest of the countries, very little research when it comes to creating new varieties and new agricultural practices. There are institutions, but you know the industry is too divided. So those implementations of practices don't get disseminated through the fields or through the producers. Whereas in the other two countries, it's a little more controlled or more under control. So then, similar to the other countries, you know, we understood that you can treat it biologically, chemically, and then the other thing is that we kept the traditional agricultural practices. And the other thing is that most countries kept the traditional varieties until the 80s and 90s, pretty much. El Salvador until the 2000s. You know, El Salvador up until 2010 or 11 was pretty much 80% Bourbon. So, you know, again, as I mentioned, Honduras being the only one that has done things a little different, that they started developing, but also disseminating or planting their variety, which is Lempira, which is a sarchimor. It's a resistant varietal. And now I would guess that 80% of the coffee grown in Honduras is Lempira. There's a big question over there. What about quality? Yes, quality has changed, and it has changed to be a negative factor in general. I'm not saying that it's bad to have resistant varieties, but in general, and the easiest way to see this is through the differentials coffees are paid in different countries. Colombia back in the 90s were paid $100 or $1, sorry, a full dollar overprice for their coffee. And in the last 20 or 30 or even nowadays, those margins or those differentials have pretty much almost become the same as Central America. And same with Honduras. And in general, you know, quality has come down. Obviously, you all know that World Coffee Research and other institutes have been developing new varietals that will consider a better quality in the cup. And when we say quality, remember that it's not in the cup only, but also in the exportable or in the first quality that we get from those cherries that we harvest. So having said that, let's try to identify what are the key factors or the most common key factors to deal with rust. In the macro level, if you were seeing a country or a region, you would be, I think I could conclude from what I have seen that definitely research and development is a key factor in here. You need to be constantly monitoring, developing, and understanding, how these new strains mutate and how to control them. Definitely, you need to biologically and chemically control rust. Another key factor, again, that I have seen, especially in Brazil, is the distancing. And that I want to say, what I have seen in Hawaii, that's already a good thing that you all have, because what I have seen over there, because you're a lot, you're mechanized already in a way, most of it, because of how hard and how expensive labor is over there. So you have that already kind of ahead of the game. So distancing and that, yes, there is wind blowing and wind circulating, but there's not that concentration of trees all together, which, airs the soil, the sun comes in, and, that is very positive for controlling or preventing rust. The other thing is the innovative agricultural practices. As I said earlier, when I first began in coffee in El Salvador, the only pruning method that existed in this country was stumping. And stumping pretty much is waiting until the tree is almost dead, either because it's now worn out from big productions or just an old tree and you want to start from zero, which is, what happens. The tree is already too big and too worn out that you have to stump it and start again from zero. But pretty much, again, that was the only pruning method that existed in El Salvador. And in many countries still is. When I first went to Brazil, I saw that there were other ways of pruning coffee, and that's where I'm going to spend a lot of time now later on, because in our case, that I believe has been the most successful way to treat and to control rust in our case, again. So I'm going to spend a little more time on that. Another thing that has definitely, that I have seen that has worked is not focusing on one single varietal. Even if it is all resistant and the super varietal, no, because when you get hit all at once. You need to diversify the risk. You need to be able to not depend on one varietal, all right? So whether those are all Arabica, whether all those are non-resistant even, or if you go to the Robusta, you need to be able to have or not depend on a single variety. And then the other, and the other thing is, sorry that I cannot read the bottom part. Oh, my bad. Oh, what happened here? By trying to click something, I went somewhere else. Oh, how can I go back? Oh, I lost my screen. I need help. There it is.
Emilio. And just a heads up, you're about halfway through time.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. Oh, where can I start sharing screen? Here we go again. I apologize.
you can just put the presentation in here. I can select it for you. You can just click through it on the screen. Can you see it?
Yeah.
It should be on the screen.
Can you see my screen now?
No, we can't.
Okay. Okay, so now I am back with my screen. So yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. So those are, again, sorry about that, the key factors that I have seen elsewhere. When it comes to the farm level, that was a little more macro. But the things that you can do to prevent rust from invading or from massively spreading in your farm, that I have been able to, pretty much validate, at our own farms, are the following. And again, always remember, prevention comes first. That's the first thing you need to do. Prevent this from happening. So at a farm level, you need to consider, what are your environmental conditions? First of all, is there an excess of rain? Is there an excess of dry? Where does the sun start or set and rise? And how exposed I am, or how vulnerable I am to this disease. If you are in a place, and obviously you're surrounded by the ocean, there is humidity built up in the mountains, so the dew, I'm pretty sure, is pretty strong as well at some point. There's a lot of condensation, so you are pretty much exposed to that, and it's the ideal conditions pretty much that you have. But the first thing, again, is to understand that you are on the ideal conditions for rust to spread. Another one is selecting the right varietal. Most of us, when we got into farming, we already had the varietal planted. When rust came, we already had the farms planted. But if we were to be able to choose, what would we choose? So that's a key thing as well, to really decide and choose which variety are you going to plant, or what do you have, and then also provide a balanced and precise nutrition for your crop. I've seen and I have discovered and validated that a healthy and well fed tree has more chance of not being that infested, or it can stand a better a better chance to get pretty much infested at all. So a key thing in your nutrition for rust and for any fungus or something that comes in from the leaves, make sure you're feeding the right amount of calcium in your trees, because calcium keeps the walls of the cell walls stronger, and it helps prevent or makes it a little more resistant. So again, a well-balanced and precise nutrition will help you prevent rust from massively spreading. Also, what we do, and you must know this, is that you need to assure that all your pruning practices come on time. What does that mean? Right as soon as the harvest ends, is the time where you can kill the cycle of rust. If you have an infested area, as soon as you're able to prune those infested leaves and trees, you have to do these things on time. Not only the pruning in reality, but many of the practices that you need to do. to control rust. So on-time pruning is key to all this. And I'll show you what is the pruning method that I have discovered that works best with prevention. And also the other thing is that, we need to monitor and measure a possible infestation. We need to go out to the fields and really take the time to count leaves and to understand at what degree of infestation we are or the farm is before you even do anything, because you need to start keeping data. There must be a month or there must be a time in the year where you are more exposed, or where you are more likely to get infected. So I will show you a small little sheet that we use, and if you want to borrow it, you're more than welcome to do so. But you need to start monitoring and measuring this. And then the other thing, if it is needed, if prevention didn't work, well, you need to apply either a biological or chemical product on time, because that's the other thing. Sometimes we come a little late on those sprayings, and depending on how late or how early we are, that is the kind of product that we need to apply. So those are some of the key factors that I would strongly suggest that you consider to prevent rust from taking over your fields. The thing, though, is that sometimes it just comes as a surprise and it just comes too late. And let me tell you, when I was first exposed, or or our farms got exposed for the first time to this devastation, it was in 2011. Again, as I said earlier, one day everything looked incredible, everything looked precious, and then a week later we come to the farm with my parents, and it's just like what you're seeing in that picture. We just couldn't stop looking at each other, and it was just that. And the other thing is that, as I said early in the first picture, 100% of our farm was Bourbon. 100% of our farm, or not 100. By that time in 2011, I had already experienced or experimented with other things, but pretty much 90% of the farm was Bourbon. Everything was managed the same. Only once, 90% of the farm was only stumped, and the whole country only had Bourbon and only did very traditional work. So it was just the perfect scenario for this thing to spread out like wildfire. So again, sometimes it's just too late. I have to say that it was then that I understood, and when I saw what could help me. And it was curious because by me going to Brazil earlier in my career, I started seeing other pruning methods. I started seeing other varieties being planted in the farm. So in 2011, when we got hit by rust in El Salvador, in our farm, I started seeing there were certain parts of the farm that did not have rust at all. And they pretty much were shining because everything was dead, and just about 20% of the farm did not have anything. And it just happened that 20% of the farm the year before I had pruned with a pruning method called a skeleton pruning. So what I had done was that because of a high yield year, I had to go and prune the branches of worn out trees. And those trees did not have rust. They had new foliage and they had no rust whatsoever. So pretty much my first trip to Brazil saved my business because I was very well invested by that time in coffee, and I needed to come out of the problem fast, or as fast as possible. I show that picture because what I learned in Brazil is that farming over there it looks just like that picture. What do you have there? If you look close, on the far right, or on the lower right here, you have an adult lot. This lot over here, those trees are fully grown, right? Also, this right here, if you can see my cursor, and to the left, you see very, old trees at their full capacity almost. Also, then there's a little car over here, and those trees are not that fully developed or as big as these, but they're in their mid time or mid age of their life. And then in the middle, you see even an area where it has a year of planting, and then you see a white or brown area where there's new planting, okay? So in Brazil, what they do in the system that they have learned and created throughout the years is that you do not want your farm all looking the same or all being managed the same at the same time. Why? Because when things like rust happen, you pretty much just everything is attacked at the same time. So what we're seeing here is kind of what happened to me. I started noticing that 90% of the farm or 80% of the farm was hit bad. Those were the old trees, those were the old branches, those were the high yield trees. And what I saw was that the trees that I had just stumped or pruned, they did not have rust, okay? And also some varieties that I had planted as well had less rust than the others. So that's what in 2006, when I visited Brazil, I could quote that being the trip that saved my business. So I showed you this picture up top first, when I first started talking about, where did I come from and where did I start? So what it started like that, everything looking exactly the same, now I turned it into what you're seeing below. It's the same farm that I showed you, except for the middle one. That's another one of our farms. But the two pictures on the bottom, left and right, they're the exact same farm as the one in up top. So what I started to do, back in 2009, I started, learning, or I started implementing what I had learned in Brazil and in other countries. By then, I also had been to other countries. And I started planting different varieties in different lots and throughout the farm. And not only I started planting more varieties or new varieties, but I started also distancing and planting more organized throughout the farm. I did remove some of the shade as well, but I planted it again. I just wanted to have them in order. So again, that's what I started with, and now it's a little bit of what I have now. So at our farm specifically, the things that we're doing currently that have really showed positive effect on not being hit at least all at once are the following. So we have various varietals. We have 12 different varieties at our farms, none of which are resistant to rust. And I want to say that because I am still to date a little bit hesitant to go for the resistant varieties at our farms. I have been able to get away with it or controlling it I just don't want to depend on a single variety or too little. So we have 12 high value or exotic varieties at our farms. All the Bourbons, yellow, orange, red, geishas, SL34s, SL28s. We have a few strains of Ethiopians. We have Laurinas. We have different varietals, but we do not want to depend on a one varietal. So various varietals separated are key to prevent a big devastation or a big impact if you get hit. Also, now we manage the farm by lots. So it's easy to divide the farm and say, okay, this lot over here needs pruning this year. This one is at full production, we won't touch it. And then this one needs renewal, or this one needs, so balancing out the age and the structure of the farm by managing the farm differently is super key. The other one is we learned that we needed to promote new foliage with pruning. And I will show you a few slides on that. And then the other thing is that not only we needed to promote foliage, but we needed to create those cycles of pruning. The areas where we got hit the worst by rust, those were the ones that you need to go break the cycle of the spreading or germination of the spore. So we do that now by cycles. That also helps us control the output of the farm and balance it out. We don't necessarily have those huge peaks and lows, similar to what Brazil has done. It's increasing, but they don't have those big spikes, at least not for rust, from rust. And then the other thing is that the crop nutrition, I said earlier, a well-fed, a good, strong tree, it's less likely to be infested by rust. I have to say though, a high yield or a very high productive tree will get hit by rust because it's just got too much production or output on it. And then the on-time tasks, on-time pruning, on-time spraying, because we do spray, and I'm going to talk a little bit of what we do. But we're allowed to spray in El Salvador still. I'll talk a little bit of what we do. But the on time, 1 week could destroy your farm. So these are the key factors that we do. And I'm gonna focus right now on one, because for us, the single most important action for preventing rust for us is pruning. Because again, I started noticing, and I have seen, and I can guarantee you that rust does not like new foliage. Rust likes an old tree. Rust loves an old branch, old leaves. A tree that has been recently pruned is not as attractive to rust at all. So what we started doing, and there's some examples here, we started doing something that in Brazil is known as skeleton pruning. We do it a little bit different than what they do over there. If you see the tree on the left, that tree has just been pruned. And the one on the right is exactly the same lot, but a year later. I wish I could focus on those, or I could zoom in those trees on the right, and for you to see, how much coffee that they have and how well did they react to the pruning. So one thing that we do different than in Brazil is that we don't go full on skeleton pruning the whole tree. We're very selective on which branches to prune and which not. And also, we don't necessarily also do the capping. Sometimes we do. If the tree needs to cap it, we will cap it. But in Brazil, in most of the times, they skeleton prune and cap the same year. If you see the tree on the left, we did not cap the top. We just skeleton prune the bottom. The tree on the right, even if all the rest of the farm around it has rust, those trees won't have rust. Believe me, they won't. Why? Because the leaf is still very young and it's new foliage. Rust doesn't like that. And you can try it yourself at your farms, and I'm going to show you how we do it in a second. But that's what we have learned from doing it at our farm. Another example on the left, we have trees that had just been pruned or skeleton pruned, and then on the right are exactly the same trees a year later. All right, so and how we do it, I don't know if some of you might have these machines already. These ones are manual, but you can find them also, in tractors. This was a video that it's supposed to play, but it's not allowing me to play it. Let me try one more time. It might be too heavy. So unfortunately, the video is not playing. I'm going to continue because I'm almost done with the time. So that's how we do it. We go and select specifically which trees will be pruned. We don't necessarily, again, prune the whole tree. There are some trees that, for example, the one on the right, it has some branches that are very, very worn out, or they're dry. Those are the branches that we will go after. And the ones in the bottom, if you see, they're still green and lush. We won't touch those. So it's a very selective pruning that we're doing with that machine. And then the second most important practice for rust prevention and control for us has been to monitor and acting on time. We want to, first of all, determine what is the limit of where we would consider an application or a spraying, or when would we consider an infestation, okay? And when is it time to just go 100% and spray? Because we have been forced to do that as well. Sometimes you try, to be preventive, but sometimes you just have to react. So we use, this is a very simple little form that someone takes with them when they go out in the field, and we call it a rust infestation index, just to understand the percentage that we have of infestation. So pretty much you go out, you stand around anywhere in the farm, you want to select different separated areas, and you go and stand, and all around you, all the trees that are around you, you select 140 samples or leaves, and then you count out the leaves that are clean, the leaves that are infested, and then you come up with a percentage. Again, this is what we do. We borrow it most likely from another operation, but that's what we're doing. And then we have limits. So like anywhere from 3% infestation down, we would go specifically to those spots where we noticed it and spray, whether that is a biological product or whether we just want to be very precise and make sure we kill that. At that level with 3%, we would either go with copper or we would go with something biological. We would not go with something systemic, as we will see what is the difference in a moment. But so that's what we do. Pretty much when it's infestation, when infestation is off the limits, or it's a full-on infestation, we have to spray. Sometimes again 100% of the field. and pretty much to understand what these products do. And again, I am not an engineer. I am not, a biologist or a chemist. So I'm going to give you a little bit of what I understand about them, and so that everyone as well understands. There are two types of products that you can apply. Systemics, at least we call them that in our country. That means that the leaves, once you spray, will absorb and transport the product or the element into the tree and even into the trunk and the roots. And you can spray either foliage or go to the trunk or the roots. And you drench or you spray. And the tree will definitely absorb that. And the benefit, if you want to say that there's a benefit for it, is that it's preventive, but also it's going to last longer with that resistance. Okay? But also there are some products that we call off contact. And sorry if that's not the term in English, but off contact to us means that you spray and immediately when in contact with the spore, it kills it. Or if you're going to use a biological product, you would use the new spore will take over the existing spore. So the two main things, systemic and off contact. The systemics, pretty much there are two main products, the triazoles and the strobilurins. Both nowadays are being banned everywhere we export coffee to. So more and more we need to rely on a biological way, or again rely more and more on pruning or other methods to prevent rust from happening. Because, for example, Japan, which is probably your main market as well, I'm pretty sure it is. Japan is banning a lot of this already, and in Europe as well. So more and more, these products are banned. So again, you need to rely on a biological way slowly. For us, that we have been dependent on chemicals for 50 years, it's very hard for us to go from one end to the other right away. But again, we're a little bit ahead of pretty much everyone else, at least in the country, when it comes to, understanding that the pruning helps, that everything on time helps, that the distancing on planting helps, that less shade helps, and so on. So, and then of the contacts, one of the most common ones is copper. Copper is not banned. You can use copper, I'm pretty sure, over there. But the thing is that it lasts very shortly, and it's something that immediately controls it. And then the other ones are the natural ones or biological ones, where are the trichoderms and neurotrine saccharinesis, this is something new. And what are we doing? We're trying them all. We still use chemicals because we're able to still use them. But what we do is that we use them early in the, early in the rainy season. Once the beam is fully formed, we do not use any more chemicals or systemics. We only use contacts. So that's what we do. And so that's a little bit of what we have done and discovered in El Salvador. I have, unfortunately, very little experience. I have been to Hawaii. I know what it looks like, and I know what you go through. But from the little research that I have done, I can, I think, and I might be wrong in a few things, but the things that I would watch out or consider in Hawaii is that, as I understand, 5 of the 8 islands have coffee. the main island, or Hawaii Island, is the biggest producer, and it's mainly in Kona and Kau, where it's grown. And when I was there, I noticed it, and now that I read it, it's mainly small farms or small farmers concentrated on these two areas. So going back to the slide of when I was saying, how do you see it in the macro? In the macro, what you're seeing is that you have various actors, right? So, so either you do it all together, or everyone is going to do their own thing. So then, okay, another thing that I noticed out of the main island or the big island is that what I saw, at least, it might have changed by now, but I saw a lot of Típica. So Típica, we all had it, and El Salvador had it. That was the first variety that we had here. But Típica is one of the most infected one of the varietals. So you need to know that. And yes, Típica, we still have Típica, and it reacts very good with the pruning. So make sure that you try it out, and promote that foliage from growing new foliage after the harvest. So that's again, those things you need to take in consideration. Again, your variety, I would guess that at least 80% of the big island has Típica, and then again, 80% of the farms are small. So you need to take that in consideration for a strategy to control rust. If you act together, I think you have better chances to do it. If you go to the farm level and not the macro, you need to start probably, again, pruning, introducing new varieties. You need to monitor. Those are the little things that you can start doing. Also in Maui, I understand that it's the third largest producer, and as well, similar to the Big Island, there's a lot of farmers. So you have to also do the little bit of the same, as I understand. Again, in Kauai, is the smallest, is a small as of an island, but a high producer because it is pretty much concentrated in 3 farms. So it's very easy over there to solve or to have a strategy because there's few actors, and I'm pretty sure over there, I don't know if it is that few farms. I'm pretty sure they're almost mechanized, probably. So that, resistant varieties must or probably are there already. So I see that island as one of the easiest probably to have that approach on like how to solve a problem. And then Oahu also is mainly concentrated of small farmers, and as well high dependent on Típica. And then I understand that also on Molokai, there is coffee as well, and it is a single farm. So again, easy to control, but at the same time, very risky if you don't have a strategy to control or prevent it. Because if it goes there and you don't have resistant varieties or robusta, you're going to get hit pretty hard. So that is what I understand. What is ahead for you all and for everyone? Hey, coffee will always grow in Hawaii. We will always have coffee around us. As I said, we had broca, or the berry borer being introduced or come into Hawaii only 10 years ago or less, and you're still there. Yes, it is harder to control, and the beans, unfortunately, have been drilled a lot, and it's heavy sorting, and probably have sometimes 5% infestation, sometimes 20, but you're still there. It's just learning how to control both, because very few chemicals are allowed in Hawaii, you're able to control probably rust and broca with other spores or with funguses. So that is something to bear in mind. And the other thing is that rust has come to stay. You know, it's not going to go anywhere, whether you like it or not. And you're going to have peaks. Some years is going to come stronger than others, because some years are, you know, more rain than others, or more humid. Some years are drier. Some years we have a really high harvest, and the trees are a perfect target for the rust. So it's here to stay, and you have to learn to live with it, and understand all the tools that you have to control it. The other thing is that, hey, you have to adapt. You know, we as farmers, if you think in history, you know, we as farmers have been adapting. You know, the weather is changing, has always changed. Climate change is the oldest story ever told in human history. You know, it has killed civilizations. It has wiped out civilizations. It has made big migrations. We need to adapt to these changes and to this new plagues, because that's the other thing. There's going to be challenges always, and there's going to be other plagues. Let me tell you that for us, rust is not anymore the biggest problem we have when it comes to plagues or pests. The biggest problem that we now have is anthraconosis, which is pretty much similar to the berry borer disease. That is, it dries out the branch and it kills the tree. We also found, by the way, that skeleton pruning also helps with that. You know, so sescospore, you know, it dries out the bean and the branch, and it, you know, those plagues are going to keep coming. You know, especially now with transportation methods coming in and out of an island, is, you know, it's going to keep coming to you. And the other thing, and I'm going to close with this, you know, always keep in mind, Hawaii is privileged because there is such a demand for your product, and they pay for it. And that's the key part over here, because in our country, you know, it just keeps getting more expensive and more expensive to produce coffee, but the price for it doesn't go up. And in average, just for you to know, in average, even us that we really focus on high-end and exotic varieties and a lot of that, even for us, averaging $2.75 a pound to $3 a pound on the green is a very good price. And you, on the other hand, are averaging sometimes even $20 for the green. And I know it's more expensive, probably 2, 3, 4 times more expensive because of labor. But I believe that your market and your customers will be able to pay more. Unlike ours, you know, there is a ceiling apparently for us. For Hawaii coffee, I think it will be more expensive to produce, yes, but you have a very, very privileged market over there where it's mainly tourists, mainly Japan and other, South Korea probably, or Australia. I don't know which other markets do you have, or, you know, inside, but it's something that we on the rest of the world really have a problem with, that, you know, our ceiling or roof for our price, it's fixed pretty much. For you is different. So with that, I hope that, you know, I helped a little bit of, for you to see what's coming for you, what has worked for us, what could work for you all. I hope you enjoy the rest of your convention. When I first was invited to come and speak to you all, I could only think, okay, yeah, after pandemic, I can go and visit Hawaii. That would be awesome. But a couple of days later, I'm like, oh, actually, it's virtual. So I hope I can come soon, and I hope you got away something from this talk. And I want to thank you for your time. And I don't know if there's any other questions. I just hit it right on time. I think it's for me it's 2:15, and for you must be 10:15. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emilio. Great presentation. There were a few questions from the chat. I've got about half a dozen here. Technically, our time is ended. So for anyone who doesn't want to stay for the Q&A, there is a half-hour break between now and the next talk. But do you mind answering a few of these questions, Emilio?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes, not a problem at all.
Okay, so the first one we have is a question from Todd. We are taking back a 2-acre coffee planting that has not been maintained well for a decade. It is surrounded by other unmaintained coffee. As we clear and prune, we are seeing rust all over the planting. At this point, what should we do? Should we start spraying copper, or should we use hydrogen peroxide?
So Todd, I mentioned a little bit that I was well invested and I needed a quick solution. And when I said highly invested, is that I had been buying other farms, and other farms looked just like what you described. So in most of those farms, we went ahead and stumped 100% of the coffee trees, and we wanted to start from zero. I would urge you or suggest that if you want to start, if you're starting almost from scratch, or if you want to go ahead and stump, because the reason that I would suggest stumping only would be if it really doesn't have any crop, if it is really in a bad situation, you could stump. Or if you have all the resources that you need, well, if you want to remove everything and plant from zero, go ahead. But that is very expensive. Or the easiest, as I have, the first time that I started doing this, I divided the farm in 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 if you want, and start by blocks. Divide your farm and start by blocks slowly. Stump everything, but then leave a short area to introduce either a new farm or a new varietal, or introduce a new method, and just diversify the risk. That's the most important thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, the second question was from Joan. What specifics about the ideal spacing between trees? As in, what spacing have you found that works well for your farm for controlling coffee leaf rust?
For us, again, I mentioned that we have 12 different varieties. None of them are coffee or rust resistant. And to be honest, the one with the highest value is the one that reacts and is the best for rust, which is geisha. So geisha at our farm, it doesn't get affected much by rust. But the most important thing is that is the one that reacts the best with the skeleton pruning. That variety really, really responds very nice with the pruning.
All right, ready for the next question?
But then others, even Bourbon works very well with pruning, and it's, you need to understand that when you skeleton prune, the first year, you pretty much have zero harvest. The second year, you have a very nice, decent harvest. The third year, you have the harvest of the life for the tree. So when you have such a big yield, the tree will definitely suffer, and the tree will definitely get hit by rust. So make sure you understand, and you are prepared to see a tree very well infested. We are already used to it. So again, because we have the production, or we have it in cycles. We understand already that some lots will be completely devastated after the harvest because they were highly producers, and many plagues were going to go to those trees. Yes, for sure.
All right, we've got a couple of questions pertaining to exactly how you do the skeleton pruning and
Yes.
exactly what capping is. That is from Una and Andrea. So like if you could go into some further details about that, that would be great.
Yeah, so
Patrick
skeleton pruning
said,
pretty much is using a hedger, the trimmer that you use for plants or for bushes in your garden. What you're doing, just like you're trimming a bush in your garden, what does trimming do for a tree? You know, you're removing old foliage and creating new foliage that looks more beautiful. But in the case of coffee, you make them more productive as well. So in the case of Típica, Típica is a great example that it can be benefited by pruning. Típica has on its trunk a very long segment between the branches. And then the branches are very, very, very long with clusters well separated between them. When you skeleton prune, what you're doing is creating from one branch, you're creating 3 or 4 or even 5 new branches. Those new branches are productive. You're going to get more harvest from them. What is capping? Capping means a stump on the top of the tree. So you're telling pretty much the tree, you need to stop growing vertically and grow on the bottom. Grow on your branches. Sometimes we do it after we skeleton prune or the year after, so that the tree loses less energy trying to grow vertically, and now it goes faster even in the branches. Or sometimes the top part is already too worn out, or it has produced so much that it's dried out, and you don't want to remove the whole tree, so you just want to cap it.
do with the pruned rust leaves once basically the leaves have been pruned off the tree?
Oh, so like that's
right.
pretty much the best part, because
we're running out of
all
time.
that is just that is going to the ground. But hey, so let's talk about the prevention first. If you're pruning because you're trying to prevent rust from happening, all those leaves are still very, they're still very clean. They're not infested or infected. If you're pruning a tree that is completely infested with rust, the most important thing is the timing. You want to do it when it's really dry. As soon as the harvest begins, you skeleton prune a very infested tree, so there's no rains coming for the next month or 2. That way it's on the ground and it's just going to dry out. It's going to die because the spore doesn't have the leaf to be sucking on, and then the soil is dry. So again, that's why I mentioned about the timing. The timing is key here.
I'm going to combine the last 2 questions into one from Joan and Margaret.
Okay.
Is how often do you skeleton prune? Right, perfect.
That is complicated but very simple question. The tree will tell you. The branch will tell you, because you want to prune before the branches dry out. A tree with dried branches, you would be producing, or you would be feeding wood, pretty much. You don't want to be feeding twigs. You want to be feeding. You want to you want to be able to transport the fertilizer through sap to the branches that are healthy. You know, if you wait too long to skeleton prune, you are way too late. You want to start skeleton pruning when the tree still has lower branches that are alive. If the tree already has 50% of the tree in the bottom part without any branches, or they're all broken or dry, you know, you better off stumping and starting from scratch. You want to start pruning or skeleton pruning a tree when it still has branches that are healthy in the bottom.
Pretty much all the time we have. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge, Emilio. And
thank you so much, Julie, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone.